Скажіть, пані Ганно, що потрібно робити громадськості, експертам для того, щоб Україна стала повноправним членом Північно-Атлантичного альянсу?
Дуже дякую, пане Ігоре. Maybe I'll shift to move to English. So thank you for organizing this very important discussion. What civil society representatives could do. Actually, yesterday, more than 80 representatives of think tanks in Ukraine, they published an appeal of Ukrainian civil society organizations to NATO leaders ahead of Vilnius summit. And our position is very clear. We do believe that NATO members will follow the example of Ukrainian armed forces, will be brave and actually provide or to commit to inviting Ukraine to join NATO as soon as possible. And we firmly believe that such a commitment will be the most effective instrument for ending Russia's war against Ukraine, preventing new aggression, maintaining Ukraine's democratic transformations, and reconstructing Ukraine through partnership with private enterprise and NATO member states. We also try to explain that invitation doesn't mean accession tomorrow. So actually, even in case of Finland, record-fast NATO accession, the process took almost a year. I just came from Berlin and Brussels last week, and also one day spent in Warsaw talking to different partners. In German Bundestag and Chancellery office, there were different questions. What will be the reaction of Mr. Putin if Ukraine get a formal invitation in Vilnius summit? This is, I think, really very strange to hear such question. I think NATO should care about NATO's future and not what will be the reaction of Putin, because we already saw the reaction of Putin on attempted rebellion this weekend. So we at our International Center for Ukrainian Victory, we recently published this endgame scenarios for Russia's war in Ukraine. And there are different, so we made mathematical matrix with all Putin's elites, their interest, supporters of Great Russia, also people who just like money and fight for resources. And there are also different type of scenarios, NATO and the EU response options. So let me be very honest. In case of this incrementalism approach, which we are seeing after the full-scale war, it means that in the war of attrition, Ukraine is not capable to compete with Russia. I think this very wrong approach with sanctions, this incremental approach. Today we impose sanctions for 10 banks, in half a year for another 10 banks. Or we will impose sanctions on this military industry, but forget about others. This is why Russia, after 16 months of full-scale war, adapted their strategy and technology and producing new kamikaze drones, glide bombs against us. Even Kiev is not protected because we don't have enough anti-air defense system, and this is, I think, very important. But I would like to focus on one of the positive scenarios, because I truly believe that in 21st century, it's first time that we have to win. We all obliged to defeat Russian imperialism in Ukraine. And one of the scenarios is NATO and EU response options, strong resolve. Strong resolve means arms transfer to Ukraine are backed by NATO war production at a level sufficient for NATO and Ukrainian defense and dominant armed forces of Ukraine counteroffensive. Sanctions on the Russia Federation are an effective limit to Russian militarization. Russia asymmetric warfare in the global south loses traction as malicious actors are marked as crime syndicates and terrorists. So it's published online, so actually you could read, but the message is key. Where is the victory strategy for Ukraine in Western societies? I see this fear of Ukraine defeating Russia and then what? Western leaders, they don't know what to do with the collapse of Russia. Let's be frank. The Soviet Union disintegration in 1991 was a defeat of Russian communism, the defeat of communism, but not the defeat of Russian colonialism. This is why in 21st century Russia is allowed to commit genocide against us. So I think what is really important to understand that the collapse of totalitarian Russia may be the prerequisite of lasting peace in the European continent. And also I would like to say that Ukraine's accession to the EU and NATO is the #1 prerequisite for sustainable peace. This is why we, civil society, this is answering on your question, what the civil society could do. We published and presented also this Sustainable Peace Manifesto. So only strategic defeat of Russia or sustainable defeat is a way of de-imperialization of Russia. I don't want my kids in the future to be sent to the battlefield to fight with another war with Russia in like 10 or 20 or even 30 period of time. So this is why, of course, maybe we are too radical. But I think NATO, finally, NATO leaders, and I know what I heard in Berlin, in Brussels, and also we are very thankful to France now for demonstrating a true leadership, maybe because of the idea of strategic autonomy, defense autonomy, and Ukrainian armed forces are de facto the European armed forces. And what happened during the weekend in Russia, it's another reason to reconsider this reluctance and actually to help Ukraine to get a formal invitation in Vilnius summit. I don't understand when I hear this message, Biden is against. The US is not ready at this summit to provide Ukraine the formal invitation. Or this is because of unity. Hannah, you understand? There is no unity inside NATO countries. This is why we are not ready to provide a formal invitation. So colleagues, sorry for emotions, because for me personally, after chairing the Foreign Affairs Committee from 2014 to 2019, 5 years, and I remember this period when Ukraine was under pressure. Please don't ask weapons. Only political diplomatic way to go. Only through peaceful settlement we will help Ukraine to solve Russian problem. And so what? We failed. And now Russia is committing genocide. Genocide already more than 17 months. And everyone is sitting here and afraid of Ukraine defeating Russia. At the price of what? Sacrificing Ukraine? So just 2 months ago, I made one post in Twitter. Maybe I'm not right, but I will read it. Crime of inaction is worse than crimes of aggression. When you know you can help and save lives, but don't do this, or deliberately delay with decisions. Moral decadence or degradation is much more cynical. This is how evil prevails. So I think we should talk about crime of inaction. And I think this summit will become either historic one, or I don't know, what should happen, the third world war? So I think it's enough for centuries, because Russian imperialism from 1721, when Peter I, I would not dare to name his Peter the Great, steal the name of Kiev Rus, and rename Moscovia, still in our name. Then during Soviet time, when genocide, Stalin or man-made genocide against Ukraine happened, and now another genocide. So, and only after 90 years of Holodomor as a genocide, European Parliament and UK Parliament recognize Holodomor as the genocide. Do we need another 90 years to recognize that Russia is committing genocide? So this is why inviting Ukraine to NATO, demonstrating this bravery, it means we are all thinking about our common future, but not just observing how Ukrainian, the best soldiers in the world, are bleeding. And we are discussing what will be in the 11th package of sanctions and why Rosatom is not included. So I want to implement my dream, one day to visit Moscow and to see in the Red Square the monuments of Russian genocides against Ukrainians, against Chechens, against people who died in Syria after usage of chemical weapon. Because we also have to think about de-imperialization and decolonization of Russian history. So I think it's higher time to wake up, and it's higher time not to use Ukraine to protect your democracy, because it's about all of us. So I have a lot of papers, you could see I'm prepared. But the question is not about talking about arguments, it's about moral decision. And I remember last year when we did a protest in Brussels, standing with the posters, because one leader said, every inch of NATO should be protected. I think, yes, every inch of NATO should be protected. Every inch of Ukraine should be free from Russian occupiers. But what about morality and humanity? Does morality end at the NATO borders? Does humanity end at the NATO borders? So this is why, my colleagues, if you ask me what is the role of civil society, to remind all leaders about responsibility. Otherwise, democracy or security without helping Ukraine to win and inviting Ukraine to NATO, it will be just blah, blah, blah. Thank you.
Дякую.